Welcome to Sarder TV, an idea-sharing platform founded by Russell Sarder, who's an author, investor, and the CEO of Netcom Learning. We're thrilled to have Ross Dawson join us virtually today. Ross is a futurist and strategy advisor, and he's the author of a book called Thriving on Overload, which he's here to tell us more about. Ross, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you here today.
My pleasure.
Start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background and your career journey.
So I've lived a very international life. I was born in Australia. My father got a job at the United Nations, so I went to the International School of Geneva. And that really was very formative in being in a school with 65 nationalities represented and just all of this meld of just the seeing and, acknowledging that we have so much diversity around us. And that was an incredible education. So after studying physics in university in England, came back to Australia and worked first in computing, then in international equity sales. And I had to said, it's time to move on. I flew to Tokyo, sort of on spec, and said, all right, what's going to become of, what am I going to make of this? And ended up becoming a financial journalist. So bringing my love of communication to this idea of finance, and ended up getting a series of promotion and ran the capital markets group globally out of London. So it was only after that I said, okay, that's enough of working for corporations and doing my own thing, and came back to base myself in Australia, but work globally to build my career in, I suppose, where I saw value being created. And a lot of that was in this, ultimately, how it is that we think effectively about the future as individuals, as organizations. How do we get some sense of what might come to pass and what we can do now to be able to shape that? So through that career, being able to write books, communicate, travel, sort of working in well over 30 countries around the world to help organizations and leaders think about the future. So it's been quite a lot of variety along the way.
You call yourself a futurist and a strategy advisor. What's your mission as a futurist, and tell us a little bit about your role as a futurist?
My role as a futurist, that's what I believe, and other people may interpret that role differently. My role is to help leaders, individuals, organizations to think more effectively about the future so that they can act better today. The reality is we can't know what the future will bring, but we have many indications, we have many clues, we have insights which tell us not only some trends which are developing, some understanding of human nature and the way the world works, to get some insight into not necessarily what will happen, but what might happen, and what are the things we can do today which are more likely to move us towards a future that we want. And so that's my role, is to help, as I suppose, amongst other things, to help people think more about the future than they would otherwise, in a constructive, useful way, so that we can act to create a future which is better than it might have been otherwise.
We're here to talk a little bit about your book, Thriving on Overload. Tell us what inspired you to write this book.
I have always been an infophile, a lover of information. And I think many of us are, and it's a useful attribute in a world which is awash with information. So I've always read extensively, always looked for the latest news. Part of the reasons I went into finance and financial markets as a career is because you get more information than anyone else. And this is what I recognized, that when I was working in these worlds, is that these are skills, and ones which are not taught, but one which people just work out for themselves. And it just became more and more clear to me that these are the fundamental skills that we require to succeed. And I wrote an article called Information Overload, Problem or Opportunity 25 years ago. And I think it's safe to say we have more information today than we did then. We're more overloaded, but still the same principles apply, where as we get more information, there are those practices and principles which can help us not just to not feel overwhelmed, but to feel enabled, but to also to be better at making decisions, at seeing opportunities, at being able to weave our life through a world which is fundamentally one of information.
You started researching and developing these best practices, like you said, you started around 25 years ago. Tell us how you went about actually developing some of these methodologies.
Well, the first step was simply observing what I saw in my own practices. I describe this, use this term information masters. And I'm sure you can know some people who are masters of information. They always know what's going on. They're on top of the information. And, without boasting, I'm probably pretty good at it myself. So part of it is observing my own practices. But again, working in a world of, global capital markets and financial markets, and as well also in professional services with many of my clients, so lawyers, accountants, management consultants, so on. I could observe. I could see the people around me, see the ones that were better at them, see what they did, ask what they did, and to discover from that. So it was both a practice of observing my own practice and bringing those to light, saying, okay, what is it that I'm actually doing? What is it that my colleagues that I see are extraordinary at this? What are they doing? And to build those into this structure and practice so that I could continue to improve, to experiment, to build on that over time. And of course, the role of the futurist is absolutely making sense of the world, seeing from all of the possible information, or everything that we can see in the world around us, this synthesis, this pulling together, the seeing of the whole that enables us to see better in the future. So again, not just for myself and my own practice as a futurist, but my many colleagues that I know around the world, in that world, to be able to distill, to observe, to bring to light the practices that are the most effective in dealing effectively with unlimited information.
So can you give us some examples of people that we might know in the real world who you might consider masters of information?
Well, I'd say a pretty fair starting point is to look at anybody that's extremely successful, and they are very likely to be very good at that. And the obvious examples spring to mind: your Elon Musk's, or Warren Buffett's, or any other investors or venture capitalists, as Fred Wilson or Jason Calacanis, or any investors, anybody that is in fast-moving industries, in investment, in fast-moving industries, by their nature, has to be extraordinary at this.
So in your book, you talk about the 5 connected powers. And this is really about how we can capitalize on the information, on all this information, so that it actually, improves our lives and our careers rather than feeling overwhelmed by it. Tell us more about these connected powers.
So there's 5 powers that together give us the capability of excelling in a world of information overload. The first one is purpose. And we need to know why. Why is it that we want to have any information at all in the first place? What is it that we want to achieve? Why are we working? What are the objectives we want? What are the things we want out of that? What relationship do we want? What do we want for ourselves in our lives? What is the purpose for engaging with information? The second is framing. And this is where we build frameworks where the information that comes into us is just bits of information. It only creates value and knowledge and understanding when it is connected together in a framework, which is the foundation for our knowledge. So we need to learn how it is we pull together the pieces to make sense of them. The third power is filtering, where we need to use these skills to discern between what is valuable to us and useful to us and what is not valuable to us. And because it's just irrelevant, or maybe it's wrong, or maybe it's deliberately trying to mislead us. And using the sources that we have to be able to find the sources that are useful for us. The fourth power is attention. And this is recognizing not just that we're either focused or not focused, but there are different ways in which we can pay attention, and they each have their own role in being able to make sure that we are paying attention to the right things and using that well to distill value from that. And the fifth and final power is synthesis, which is pulling together all of the insights that we have, all of the things that we come across into the understanding, the seeing of the whole, which is ultimately feeding our ability to see opportunities, to keep ahead of change, make better decisions, and create what it is we wish to create.
You also talk about the importance of meditation. You mentioned Zen in your book, and this is really around strengthening our attention and being able to use those to better capitalize on this information and process this information. Tell us more about that.
We need to have the ability to have our minds look at one thing for a period of time. The default mode network that neuroscientists talk about is that our mind wanders. That is the default mode of our mind. And unless we are specifically focusing our mind is wandering all over the place. And that actually has a function. It is part of the way in which we understand the world, which we think about our lives and the people around us and what it is we want to do. It is valuable. But to process information, to acquire knowledge, to build understanding, we do need to have focus. And that is being pulled away from us. We're in a world where the largest corporations are spending billions of dollars to hijack our attention and pull it away from us at every moment. And we are succumbing to that. So we do need to have these disciplines of being able to maintain attention for a period of time. One of the most powerful ways, or probably the most powerful way, not the only way, is meditating. And meditating is simply having your attention on one thing, whatever that may be, for a period of time. And unless we are getting our ability to have our attention for one thing on a period of time, then our mind will always be wandering and we will not be able to achieve anything like what it is we could achieve otherwise. So I came to this partly from childhood. I came across the idea of Zen. I thought, oh, this is incredible. And that was one of the reasons I went to Japan. And I ended up living in a Zen dojo for a year, where I lived there and went to my daily job as a financial journalist and meditated twice a day and was part of that community. And one of the aspects of Zen, which I think is particularly relevant, is that distinct from many other forms of meditation, you meditate with your eyes open. And this is in a way you are connected to the world. You are seeing the world. You're not cutting yourself off from it. If there is a fly buzzing on the wall, if the sun is turning gradually, if there's the honking of cars around you, that is experience, that is information, that is part of your connection to the world. So any form of meditation is just simply honing your capacity to pay attention to the one thing for a period of time, an incredibly valuable skill. And just for me, Zen is one which resonates with me, not least because it is about being connected to the world, existing and seeing the world as you sit there.
Tell us about how you practice Zen or meditate today.
Part of it is being able to have a schedule. And so this is part of my advice to people who are just starting to meditate is my own practices, because it is hard. It is hard to take the time of day to be able to sit down. It's sort of say, oh, I've gotten busy, I've got other things to do. So part of it is having a hook. When do you do it? And for me, one of the other things I do is I try to swim in the ocean just about every day of the year. And so go to the ocean, have a swim, and that's my time, my cue. All right, now is the time to meditate. And I just do that. So just in my back garden, eyes open, facing the wall. And what I do is I set a timer for 12 minutes. And 12 minutes, 10 or 12 minutes is actually enough to get practice your attention and to get into a different mode and to actually feel the immediate benefits from that. And if after 12 minutes says, okay, I'm feeling really busy, I just want to get back to it, then I do. If not, I continue to sit and to experience that state and to go deeper into that. And I think there is real value in not trying to say, oh, I'm going to meditate half an hour a day. If you make it far more achievable, you're far more likely to do it. And you can still continue to extend as you have the opportunity or the inclination. And so that's just a simple part of my everyday practice, which is and then the other critical part of that is to enjoy it. Can't say it's not like a chore. This is, oh, I've got to go and do this. Say, well, now is the time. I'm away from everything else. Just sitting here, appreciating I am alive. and seeing the world. And that is, incredible, a wonderful part of the day.
Have you found that practicing meditation and Zen for you, you're able to focus more in the job and when you're working?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I should say that, as I said, meditation is not the only way to practice attention. And one of the other practices which I very strongly recommend is that everybody should at least once a week, or at least 90 minutes, have a period of focused work. And this means that there's emails not open, there's nothing which will buzz or ding or make any sounds. You won't be interrupted. And you can, for 90 minutes, say, there's one thing I'm going to do. In the middle of that 90 minutes, for 5 minutes, you can get up and stretch and move around, but not check your phone. And this is a way of practicing attention. And it's hard to just do the one thing and not distraction, not be try to check something else for a period of time. But doing that every week means not only you get 75 hours of really focused work on whatever it is that's really important to you every year, but that is another way of practicing your attention. And so that's another thing I do, is I block out periods of time where I'm just saying, this is one thing which I'm doing, no distractions, nothing else. And that's, again, a way of not only refining and practicing your attention, but actually getting a lot of things done.
So you also talk about how developing skills around, synthesizing information can improve physical well-being. Tell us more about that.
Well, there's two major parts to that. One is simply that a feeling of overwhelm has very negative consequences, not just for our body. We're starting to induce a stress response, tension in the body, but also we start to release neurochemicals in our brain, which make it harder for us to be focused. And we tend to get more and more pulled away, keep on thinking there's other things we need to be doing and not able to focus on the one thing. So this feeling of overwhelm is intrinsically negative for our body, for our attention, for our state of mind, which can flow on to physical well-being. So we need to get to a place where, as much as possible, we are transcending that overwhelm. And one of, that is part of what the book deals with, is these ways in which we can start to let go of trying to keep up with too much information. But that comes significantly from this idea of purpose. These are the things that matter. This is the things that will serve, fulfill what it is I want to achieve, and understanding that everything else is superfluous, is not necessary. And I think there's many ways to bring the state of a mind of abundance, saying, I have all the information I could possibly want to achieve my objectives, as opposed to trying to keep up with something which is impossible to keep up with. And the other critical aspect is that information about well-being is fundamental for our ability to be well. And this is very difficult because there's nothing on which there is not contradictory information in health. So whatever it is, whether you have a particular ailment or your loved ones do, you're trying to understand the nature of that, or whether you're trying to keep your weight at an ideal level or to run an ultramarathon or whatever it might be, there's a lot of information available and it's not all consistent. So you need to use your skills to be able to say, all right, well, this is what I want to achieve. This is the information sources that will be the most useful to me. This is the way in which I will build a framework of that, or synthesize this information into understanding for myself what it is I can do, how it is that I can best change my habits or behaviors to support that. So in a way, our relationship with information is absolutely fundamental to our ability to keep well and help our loved ones to continue to be healthy.
What are some ways that leaders of organizations can help support, your methodologies, use your best practices and methodologies to really build high-performing organizations?
One of the first steps is simply to recognize that information capabilities are a fundamental skill that drives productivity, and well-being. So this is where it still amazes me that not just through our education system, through K-12, university, college, and beyond, but also in jobs, there is virtually no training, virtually no development of these capabilities. It's like let's sort things out. Whoever can work out how to deal well with information succeeds. Whoever can't doesn't. And everybody I know can continue to get better. And so some of the endorsements for my book, which I was happiest with, were some extraordinary people who said, I'm really, really good at this, but I've learned a lot from your book, because there's just saying, there's all these other things I can do. Yes, I may be already good at this, but if I was being conscious, all right, let's think about this as something I can get better at. What are the things I can do? So I think making this explicitly an area for development, for leaders, for managers, be that in education. I have created an online course on this, but I think there's also this ability simply to guide people to think about what is it they can do to be more effective in this at doing this. And then the second part, and this is particularly relevant in the world of remote work, is being able to help teams establish schedules that enable them to be effective and productive in the way they work. And one very simple principle, for example, is that teams agree that there are times of day when there will be no interruptions, when they don't need to respond to a call, to be on a video conference, to be on the Slack or messaging system. So this work is so much designed to be always there, always paying attention, always responding to things, which does not give people the capacity to spend a block of time to be focused, develop their capacity for attention, and develop knowledge and achieve worthwhile things. And so this is a fundamental principle of how we design work generally, particularly remote work, where we can have this capacity to say, well, yeah, okay, there are times when we're checking emails and doing things and checking in and having our meetings and so on. But there are also times when we can be completely focused, and that's recognized as an important part of the job.
You also talk about 6 attention modes that we use when we're processing information. Can you tell us about those?
Absolutely. So the idea is that attention is not just one thing. You either have it or you don't. Particularly when we're processing information, we need to be switched from different types of attention. So, one of the first ones we engage with is scanning. All right, I have various sources. There may be various news outlets, or there's a news aggregator, or there's some other sources, or your social media potentially, and say, all right, I am going to scan. And that's something where part of the rules are, okay, you spend enough time but not too much, and you are in a mode where you're just going quickly across headlines or whatever it may be to say, okay, that's potentially interest. That's potentially of interest. So this is one potential mode. It's kind of moving at quite a high level, but where what you're doing is being able to pick out what's relevant. One of the next one is assimilating, where you say, all right, well, I've discovered this article, which I really do want to go into that and make this part of my knowledge, my understanding, and I'm going to spend the time for that. And that's probably not going to be at the same time. It might be another time when I say, okay, I'm going to take a step back, I'm going to spend some time to digest some of this information, which might be something that come up early this morning, or it might be a book. Saying, all right, I'm going to spend some time reading this book and taking in this information and taking notes and so on. We also have searching, so seeking, where we need to sometimes, that's a different mode. We're in a different state of mind. Saying, all right, this is one of curiosity, finding, we're directional. We want to be able to find something specific. Another one which is lovely is exploring. And this is something where, of course, we're all spend time browsing around and looking for things. But if we start to say, well, actually exploring means, all right, I want to find things I would never normally find. And you can create serendipity. There are various practices, which I describe in the book, around how it is you can make it more likely you have these happy accidents. Say, oh, I wouldn't have expected to find something really valuable for my work here, but here it is. And so you're exploring. So we've got scanning, assimilating, seeking, exploring. And one of the most critical ones is regenerating, where we say, well, our attention is finite. It's not something we can just continue to deplete time over, all day. We need to regenerate our attention. And it's fairly clear that spending time on video streaming, for example, is not the best way to regenerate our attention. That actually is this spending time on another screen, paying attention to that, and we're dragged out. So there's a real lovely body of research around what is called attention restoration therapy, which basically means being in nature. The thing which regenerates our attention the most is being in nature, in a place where wherever we look, it's continuing to change, it's continuing to move. We have broad open vistas that we can look at. And this is essentially a state of mind which takes us away. So the philosopher Nietzsche said, it's only ideas that come from walking that have any value. And I think there's many people that wander around. That's the time when their ideas come. That's the time when they're able to get in the state of mind, which is not just letting the ideas bubble to the surface or to think in different ways, but also regenerate their capacity to pay attention in a focused way when they need to do that.
What insights can you share with us around artificial intelligence and its impact on the future of work?
The AI is advancing at an extraordinary pace. And we've seen already the amazing things that it can do. And that is day by day, we are seeing new announcements of the incredible capabilities. So this has already changed the nature of work, and it will continue to change it far faster in the future. So for a long time now, I've been thinking about this idea of the unique capabilities of humans. What is it that humans can do better than anything, including machines? And at the heart of this is synthesis, the fifth power of the five powers for thriving on overload, is the ability to pull together all of the individual disparate pieces that we come across, that we've ever experienced in our life, to come together to build an understanding of the whole. So machine learning, which is the foundation for essentially all of the extraordinary announcements from AI we've seen recently, is by its nature domain specific. You gather data from one specific area, you have specific parameters around what it is that it's doing, and from those it is able then to learn specific instances and to be able to build a model which, in those particular parameters, can outperform humans in many cases. But that is always in a specific domain. Now, in order to pull together all of those domains, we need the extraordinary human capacity for synthesis. And we can't see a timeline where that will be a fundamental capability of AI. Now, we need to be working with AI, because AI does have extraordinary capabilities. Not AI versus humans, it's AI plus humans, where a lot of those capabilities for pattern recognition, for decision-making in defined domains, whatever it may be, will be done more and more by artificial intelligence. Yet humans, with that capacity to see things from completely different classes of models of cognition, and to be able to make sense of that and pull that together is fundamental. Now, our educational system teaches us to analyze. And if we've gone to university or college, it's all around analysis. We break things down into smaller pieces. So that's what management consultants do. They analyze, they slice and they dice, and they've got these smaller pieces of how they understand things, the supply chains and the models and the structures and so on. And that has its value. I'm not saying it's not valuable, but that is training us to always be that reductionist, reducing things to smaller pieces, where the greatest human capability is that of the synthesis, the pulling together of the pieces to see the whole. And so that's something we need to nurture. We need to nurture that in ourselves, in our thinking. We need to nurture that in our children. We need to incorporate that into our education, into our society, that really valuing and supporting that capacity, which is so deeply human and so incredibly valuable, of synthesis, of pulling together to see the whole.
And it clearly takes skills and training to be able to get to that at this point.
It doesn't necessarily require training. Again, there's many people that are intrinsically good at this, but I think anybody can continue to develop their capabilities, whatever level they are. All of the great, anybody that won a Nobel Prize in a science is most likely good at synthesis. They have achieved something unique. They've literally synthesized things which have existed before into a new foundation. And again, there's some great research looking at the nature of how great scientists are incredible synthesizers. They are pulling things together, and they didn't get training on that probably. But in fact, and a great classic example is Richard Feynman, the physicist, where amongst other things, he played percussion in samba parades and things like that, and he had incredibly diverse interests. And in fact, the number of Nobel Prize winning scientists who are passionate about and deeply capable in various arts, literature, and music, and so many things is extraordinarily high. And that's one of those indicators. So in fact, that's one of the reasons why arts in the very broadest sense are so important, even in a world which is dominated by science, because it helps us achieve that faculty, that ability to see the whole.
So what are some simple steps that viewers can take right now to apply some of the methodologies that you outline in your book to help us synthesize and process information effectively?
Specifically on the synthesis, I think that there's many practices that we can engage in. So one simple ones which I've practiced and I think is a wonderful training tool is improvisational theater. And that's something where we don't necessarily need to do classes and start to get up on stage and do improv. But for example, there are a number of simple games we can play, which including one is word at a time, where you get a small group of people, you tell a story, everybody saying one word quickly in succession, and you're beginning to tell a story. And this is part of this way of synthesis, training the mind to be able to see some of the connections. A lot of research into our ability to get insight shows us that there is this way of alternating between this state of focus and analysis and thinking, and to disengage from that, to get out into the natural world, for example, to look around, see things, and to alternate. And we can build this practice of being able to say, all right, I'm going to work hard, I'm going to get to a brick wall in what I'm trying to think through, and then to be able to come back and to watch the clouds for a while, or whatever it may be, and being in a far broader state of mind and actually designing this alternating states of mind. So those are a couple of examples of what we can do to assist our capacity for synthesis. And there's a variety of other techniques in the book. But coming back to that big picture of thriving on overload, I believe we should all essentially be conscious of what it is we currently do and how it is we could be better. So in the Thriving on Overload interactive course that I mentioned, the outcome of that is creating a personal information plan, where it is you have a plan for how it is you deal with information yourself. Now, the course is very valuable, but you don't need that. I think we can all come back to think, all right, what's my purpose? How am I going to build frameworks? How is I'm going to filter? When am I going to allocate my attention in different ways? How am I going to increase my capacity for synthesis? What is the most important right now, which is going to make the biggest difference in my ability to do things? And I think anybody can sit down. So I mentioned that 90-minute session. So for example, one 90-minute session, say, all right, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to think, what do I actually do in the morning? What information sources do I look at? Could they be some better information sources? Am I spending the right amount of time with that? Should I spend a little bit of time reading something which is I know is of high value every day? When's the best time of day to do that? These are some simple questions which anybody can ask themselves. And once you've got, you might spend a bit of time to think through that. Then you've actually said, all right, I've identified some ways in which I can engage better with information. And that's something any of us can do.
You also talk about why it's critical to address information overload at a higher level when we're talking about our society, with our governments, with our schools. Tell us more about that.
As I've described, the capacity for dealing with information is fundamental to success, and that's going to be more and more the case. I think it's safe to say we live in a world of information immersion, and that's not going to turn around any way fast. So that's a prediction. We're going to have more information overload in the future. So let's get better at dealing with that now. And as I've mentioned before, our education systems simply do not teach us that. You occasionally get a media literacy program, if you're lucky, at school or at college, and those are fantastic. Those are very, very valuable. But you're lucky if you come across that. I think this needs to be part of our fundamental education from the very beginning, in terms of thinking, well, not just here are some facts about history, about science, whatever, but all right, this is a way in which you can be better at taking in this information, choosing what's important to you, to build some frameworks, to build your knowledge and understanding, to be able to think critically about the information that is coming to you as you, through your adolescence, form your political opinions, for example. And so throughout, from kindergarten, through all school, through college and education, and through indeed lifelong learning, adult education in corporations and for all adults. I think this, in a way, is like a fundamental capability on which we can build and be able to go, well, these are the things we can learn. Now you've learned how to learn in a world where there's not just far more information than you can want, but extraordinarily contradictory information where you have to sort it out for yourself. You can't delegate that. You have to be able to make your own decisions. And going on from that, our future of our democracy is completely tied to our ability to discern information and make effective decisions from it. So this is harder and harder. So we have not just misinformation, so there's a lot of wrong information. We have disinformation. There's a lot of active people trying to feed us things which we'll respond to. And there is too much information, where how do we make sense of it all when there's so many different perspectives, so much things which are contradictory, where we need to make our own decisions around not just who we'll vote for, how we'll communicate in the world, how we'll engage with our fellow citizens. So this, for us to have an effective democracy, we do need the majority of people to be able to be skilled at dealing with excessive information. So I've pointed to, moving on from the digital divide, where we have to, of course, there are still some people that are not adequately connected, that don't have access to digital devices or sufficient internet or so on. But we have largely addressed that. And so this was a bigger problem 10 or 20 years ago, when there was massive disparities between access to digital information. But now the overwhelming issue is the divide in information skills, where if people do not have the education or are not used to it or not have the right practices, they very readily go down the rabbit holes that are created for them, that mislead them, that lead them astray. And you have to understand that both commercial interests and political interests have billions of dollars at their disposal to try to mislead us. So for us to have a valid democracy, we must be developing these skills as a fundamental aspect of our society.
What's some of the best career advice you've ever gotten?
I mean, I tend to be very self-guided. But I mean, I suppose it wasn't such much advice, but I think you could take it as such, is that when I was working in corporate world, and I eventually walked into my boss's office and said, "I'm time for me to go. I've got to do my own thing." Both my boss and my boss's boss, and I think various bosses all said, "I wish I was doing that." And they didn't. They could, but they didn't. And so that wasn't advice as such, but it was an endorsement of what I was doing. And I think I think you need to be really careful about career advice, in a sense, where you're going to get as much bad career advice as good career advice. And again, this comes back to this ability to discern between all the contradictory information as what is valid for yourself. So you can always look back in hindsight and say, well, that was good career advice, and that wasn't. But I've had a lot of bad career advice. I think you need to find your own path. So that's in a way my advice, or the best advice is, I think, listen to what people have got to say, particularly those people you respect, but listen to yourself. That's the best career advice.
Yeah. And learning how to filter that information, right? Processing it.
Yes.
Well, this was great, Ross. This was really insightful, so valuable. And we hope that you'll come back and talk to us in the future.
I'd love to. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. And we'll see you next time on Sarder TV.